Hello, board gaming aficionados and vagrants. Nick here. This is Board Game Brawl, and today we're taking a look at Lost Legacy, a card game from Seiji Kanai, who's the same guy that did Love Letter, which, as you know anything about my channel, you know that I love Love Letter in all of its different incarnations. But this is actually the original Japanese version put out by Kanai in Japan through his, I think his company is called like Kanai Factory. But there is going to be an English version, or I should say a North American release of this game later this year from AEG, the same company that brought both versions of Love Letter over. But the cool thing about all of Seiji Kanai's games is that even in their native country of Japan, he makes them all bilingual, which is very helpful. Otherwise, I probably would not be doing this review right now because I don't speak Japanese. But in any case, Lost Legacy is actually very, very similar to Love Letter mechanics-wise. You're drawing a card, you're playing a card, and you're doing whatever the card tells you to do. But there's a twist to this game. So, is this as good as Love Letter because of that twist, or is it worse than Love Letter because of that twist? I'm going to show you all there is to know about the game, hopefully, and then we'll come back. I'll let you know what I think. Alright, let me give you a brief overview of Lost Legacy. It's a very simple game. So the first thing I should point out is that the game actually comes with two separate decks of cards. You have the base set, which looks like that, with the symbol down in the corner. All the cards have that symbol. Then you have the quote-unquote expansion set, which has that little symbol in the corner. And you're basically, for most games of 2 to 4 players, you're going to use one or the other of these sets. If you choose to play with more than 4 players, 5 or 6, you would basically mix both of these sets together. Or you may choose, if you're playing with less than 5 or 6 players, to mix and match these two sets. Use some cards from one, some cards from the other, and make your own set. But I'm just going to go over what all of these cards do. Let me just point out quickly that this game has the same mechanics of Love Letter of draw a card, play a card. I'll show you that in a moment. But let's go through these. We'll start with the base set. So this is the Lost Legacy card. The goal of this game is to find this card. So you have the artwork here in the name, and like I said, this is the Japanese set, but there is some very small print down here that is English. That's obviously when AEG releases their version will be much, much bigger on the card. But you see here that the Lost Legacy says that this card cannot be played, because this is your goal, but you're not going to be able to actually win with this till the end of the game. The number in the corner of all of these cards is completely irrelevant for the most part during the actual gameplay, but it is the most important thing during the investigative phase. The lower the number, the faster you're going to be able to investigate over and above the other players, but we'll get to that in a moment. So then you have the swordsman, and the swordsman can look at any other player's hand if that card has an X up here instead of a number. The X effect is ignored, and that player is out of the game, because X effects are usually cards that can attack other players. She has the Girl of Fate has the lowest investigative number, which means if you have her in your hand at the end, you're going to be able to investigate first. But if someone is able to see this card in your hand by investigating your hand or by looking at it during the course of the game, you are knocked out of the game. Assault, you can look at one other player's hand and you can exchange that card with your hand, and that's a really high investigative number. The Female Thief lets you look at any other player's hand or any card in the ruins, and if that card happens to be the Lost Legacy, you win the game. That's nice. The General, you can look at the top card of the deck. You may exchange that card with your hand. Could be useful. The Old Map is going to let you look at the top card of the deck and place it in the ruins. Then you can shuffle the ruins. The Search lets you look at any one card in the ruins, and you can exchange that card with your hand. And the Sneak Attack is a neat one. You see that this is an X card because it's mostly just negative. If you have this at the end, you will not be able to investigate, but during the course of the game, you can discard this game. If you discard this card and you get the hand of the player who looked at your... If someone looks at your card, you can discard this. You get the hand of that player that looked at your card, and they are knocked out of the game. So that's kind of cool. And let's look at the cards for the expansion set. You see that it has a different Lost Legacy. And when this card is discarded, you put this in the ruins instead of the discards, then shuffle it. Shuffle all the cards in the ruins. So you see it's slightly different than the other Lost Legacy. You have the Necromancer, who can return all discards of any other player to the deck and shuffle it. Remember that your discards, like in Love Letter, are going to be played in front of you. False Information, you can look at the top card of the deck, then shuffle it with a discard from any player, and then place it in the ruins. The Saint, with the lowest investigative score, when you are ejected from the game, you'll basically turn her over in the discards, and draw a card from the deck as your new hand, and you will remain in the game. Then you have the Adventurer. You can look at up to 2 cards in the ruins. You may exchange one of those cards with your hand. The Guardian is kind of chaotic. You collect all other players' hands and shuffle and redeal. That could be bad. The Storyteller lets you shuffle all the cards in the ruins and look at 1 card in the ruins, so that could totally ruin someone else's plan of investigating the ruins. The Curse is much like the Soldier from Love Letter. You'll name a number, which basically numbers will indicate what kind of card, except for X, and look at any one other player's hand. If the card matches the number you named, that player's out of the game. Wounds are an interesting little type of attack card. They won't let you investigate at the end, and if you happen to have 2 in front of you in your personal discard pile, you're knocked out of the game because you basically die. Now, how does this game actually play? So, like I said, this game is a lot similar to Love Letter in that you're going to be, everyone at the beginning of the game is going to get a card, and then everyone gets a card, you take 1 card out, and that is the ruins. And then you basically, on your turn, you will draw another card and play a card. You must play a card if you have the capability to do so, if you're not knocked out of the game. And that's basically the gameplay. You're just going to keep going like that. Every time you play a card, you're essentially discarding it, so you'll put it in front of you. And you're going to keep going like that until everyone's played and until the entire deck runs out. During the course of that game, other players may get knocked out from card effects that I described earlier. And even the cards in the ruins might change. More might be added. Some might be taken away, maybe. Cards can be shuffled, and the order can be changed. And people can look at the cards in the ruins using some card effects. It's just very variable. But when this deck runs out, everyone's going to look at that last card that they have in their hand. And they're going to look at the number up in the top corner. That is the only time, really, that number is going to be relevant other than with the curse card, which I'm holding in my hand by coincidence. Whoever has the lowest number is going to get to investigate first. And how you're going to work that is you don't show your card, but you just yell out, okay, who's got 1s? Okay, who's got 2s? Okay, who's got 3s? And so on and so forth. If you happen to be unfortunate enough that you draw one of the X cards, guess what? You don't get to investigate. You've essentially lost the game. How do you investigate? You're going to do one of 2 different things. You're either going to point at another player's hand or your own hand and say, I'm investigating that person's hand, or you're going to investigate 1 card from the ruins. If there is more than 1 card here, you do not change the order of the deck. You don't just draw the top one. You pick a card in the ruins and investigate it. If you're lucky, that card is the Lost Legacy, which depending on what set you're using, it could be different. Let's just say that it's this one. If you successfully find the Lost Legacy with your 1 investigation attempt, you win the game. In fact, if it's in your hand and you investigate your own hand and you have the Lost Legacy, you win the game. If you're wrong, you've lost. The next player gets to do an investigate of their own, and now they have more information. So going first in the investigation is not always the best, but it could be if you know what you're going for. But in fact, it is possible for all players to lose. If no one can guess where the Lost Legacy is correctly, let's say that there's more cards in the ruins and there's just too many players in the game and too many hands to investigate, and it's also possible that the person who has the Lost Legacy in hand isn't even, well, okay, I guess that can't happen, but nevertheless, it is possible that all players can lose, and it's possible that you just have bad random luck picking a card. But that's basically Lost Legacy. That's Lost Legacy, and I have to say that this is a very tough review for me to do. Now, it's becoming quite redundant on this channel that I love Love Letter, and that's even a redundant statement right there. It's a fantastic game. It's my #1 filler game. And so when I saw Lost Legacy, when I first saw images of it on Board Game Geek and saw that it was going to be re-released by AEG later this year, I thought, well, this is fantastic. It's like Love Letter, but it's got much cooler art. I love the idea of the investigative phase and looking for that Lost Legacy. Can't wait. Sign me up. Let me get it. So much so that I decided to import the game, even knowing that there's going to be an AEG version I could probably get cheaper later on that will essentially be the same game with the same art. But I just wanted to have this game right now. I wanted to review it and let people know what I thought about it. And it comes to this, and all I can say is, I don't know. The thing about it is this. Now, well, let's just start from the beginning. Component-wise, I mean, it's a little card game. It's another micro game from Seiji Kanai. There's a lot more cards in the box, probably double the amount of Love Letter. And I'm sorry, I will be comparing this game to Love Letter a lot. But nevertheless, there's not too many cards. I would still call it a micro game. I do like that there are the 2 different sets. They call the other one the expansion, but if you have an expansion in the base game, it's not an expansion. But nevertheless, you can play with either or. They are pretty different, and you can either put them all together to do this game with more players. The base number of players is 2 to 4. If you use both sets, you can go up to 6. But if you want, you can just take both decks and mix and match the cards to build your own set by the guidelines I have in the rule book. Like I said, all the rules are bilingual. You shouldn't have a problem with them. And I really like the artwork on the cards a lot. I wish that some of the more generic cards, like the Curse and the Storyteller, didn't have that weird kind of tribal art. I don't like that. But the art on cards like the Saint and the Girl of Fate, I really like a lot. The General, I think, has some cool art. So that I'm all very happy with. I like the little box. I'm glad that this version wasn't in a pouch like the original Love Letter. I didn't think it would be, but nevertheless. So I like that all quite a bit. No problems there. Going to the actual gameplay of the game. Now, what I do like about it are the different effects that the cards have. And I would love to see a later iteration of Love Letter introduce some of these, especially the sneak attack cards. I love those. There's cards that if you look at someone's hand, there's a lot of looking at other people's hands in this game, just like in Love Letter. And when you do that, if you have a certain card, if that person has a certain card in their hand, it will actually knock you out of the game, which is really, really cool. There's even like a promo that I got of the princess from Love Letter that you can put into this game, where if someone sneaks a look at your hand during the investigative phase, you win, as long as you've got that card in your hands. I love stuff like that. That's really neat. Some of the other cards have some interesting effects. Like the Thief also gets to look at someone's hand, and if that player has a Lost Legacy, they will automatically win. That's very cool. I love that you have to take the card out of the game at the beginning, just like in Love Letter. But unlike in Love Letter, it's not just a way to add another layer of randomness to the game. It actually has a gameplay effect. That's where the Lost Legacy could be. And during the course of the game, depending on which cards you're using from which set, you may be adding more cards there. You may be rearranging them. Looking at them, it could give you an edge at an earlier point in the game, and then when you get to the end, you could use that to your favor in the investigative phase. So, and that's what this game is. Everything leading up to it plays almost exactly like Love Letter with some new cards until you get to that investigative phase, and then it becomes a game of deduction, but not a great game of deduction. Because really, it's kind of a bad sign when the rules say it's possible for everyone to lose. In a light filler game like this, I don't really like that. But the fact of the matter is, it really can happen, especially when you're playing with more players. And let's talk about the player count real quick. Don't ever play this with 2 players. I've played this a few times with 2 players, with 2 different people, and it's just not fun. It's just now I can make the argument that Love Letter isn't as great with 2 people either, but that game, at least, it was definitely playable and it was still a good game. Lost Legacy with 2 people is not a good game. There's just no fun interaction. The ending is very anticlimactic in the investigative phase. When you get up to 3 players, though, it gets to be much more fun. You need that extra third wheel or more wheels to make the game more interesting, to have more interaction, to make the deduction actually mean something at the end. You need more people interacting with that ruin pile, all that stuff. So that's one thing. But the fact is, when you get to the end, it's very possible that it's just going to come down to random chance. Even if you can investigate first, if you don't happen to also be the person who got to look at the cards in the ruins, stack them the way that you want them to, or look at other people's hands and know that they have the Lost Legacy, it just is a random blind throwdown. And the fact is, it's a filler game, so who cares? A little bit of randomness. But this is a longer game than Love Letter. You can play a few hands of Love Letter in the time it takes you to play 1 hand of Lost Legacy. So it feels kind of awkward in that way. It feels kind of drawn out. And the other thing is that some players may get to the investigative phase and get auto-knocked out, essentially, because they have a card that doesn't have a number on it. That feels odd. I do like that you could end the game prematurely by knocking everyone else out, but I haven't seen that happen after like 8 plays, so it seems like it's probably kind of rare. So, I don't know, I'm probably seeming very ambivalent about this because I'm saying good things, but saying that some things are not that good, and I do feel odd about it. Generally speaking, my opinion, and the opinion of several people that I played with, was, why would I ever play this over Love Letter? And if we had played Lost Legacy first, and then played Love Letter, I don't think that we would ever play Lost Legacy again. I think the reason why I like Lost Legacy so much right now is because it's a nice change of pace. I had played Love Letter, both incarnations, so many times that it's like, as much as I love it, I was getting burned out. You can get burned out on even your favorite board and card games. With Lost Legacy, it was a nice change of pace, better artwork. I love some of the little twists on the cards, but really, the whole game is exactly the same up to that investigative phase, and then the game just becomes something different that I don't think is all that great. I think that it needed to have more. It needed to have more of a change to make it to differentiate itself from his other card games. I think it needed to maybe incorporate the investigative phase more into the actual gameplay leading up to it, instead of just having this like screeching halt and then switching the game. I don't know. I also think maybe it's not a good idea to have multiple ways to win. Maybe it's not good to knock players out before you get to that investigative phase. I don't know. I feel like there's a kernel of a bigger game in Lost Legacy that was just not realized. So I'm sorry I had to be so ambivalent here. I wish I can give you a more concrete answer of what to do with your purchasing power. It's a good game. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a good game. I think that if you really love Seiji Kanai's work, not just Love Letter, but his other stuff, this is a must-buy for you. And if you're just, it was a must-buy for me just because I love those mechanics and I wanted to see more of it. But nevertheless, I was still disappointed that it wasn't different enough. I think if you're perfectly happy with Love Letter and it fills what it needs to for you, which is to be a filler, then you could probably pass this up. And that's sad for me to say. But the AEG version might add a few more twists. I don't know, maybe some new promo cards. I couldn't tell you. But, try it. Try it before you buy it is the best thing I can tell you. Sorry I can't tell you something more concrete. Nevertheless, my name is Nick. This has been Board Game Brawl. Reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.